SINE is a very interesting axis. It's always been hard for me to understand, but I think once I started thinking about how SI and NE works together is when I started to understand it better in its entirety. Now, it's important to know what SI is. So SI is dealing with the concrete. It is the object from the perspective of an SI lead um that's introverted. Uh when so it's a very special function when you think about it in that way, because now you're thinking, if you're not an SI user, meaning valued, why would it be special if it's just concrete? Um it's going to be a sense impression towards the object. It would take an object in an external world and have a sense impression to it, to where it's kind of storing it, keeping it within time. But since it's concrete, it will be explaining in detail what the object is actually. And that is the sense impression to it. It's not actually thinking about the progression of the object or expanding in space, the potential of the object like SENI is, but it's more so doing it in its own way, to where the PI, since it's sense impressions, will be storing it, relating it, um kind of like being able to explain themselves. These individuals, when they speak, it's in a very hard, concrete manner that is easy to understand. It's not as vague as NI leads or NI users for that matter. It's a lot easier for them to understand it. Like, it took me about 7 times to make this video because I started off very vague in real time trying to understand it, and I had to do it again and do it again and do it again. And the more I've done it, I became stronger. And I do that with every video, but it's quite interesting when you put it in that way, when it comes down to being vague and not vague at all. I think that they will have the most easiest time explaining uh processes or explaining whatever it is that they're into for people to understand, but they would be more boring in its approach because there's not no progression even in how they sound. There's not really a dynamic point of view that's expanding it, the potential of it, that's kind of hitting bullet points like bang. There's no bang factor to it because that's the SE and I. It's more of a bang. Their NE is affected their SI on the possibilities of the object, since they already know in detail a lot about the sense impressed object. Is natural to think and see on the opposite side of that, that after doing that process, you're going to also have, as an SI lead, you're going to also have a possibility factor to it, since you know so much detail about the object in and of itself. They're making connections through a web of some sort that's branching off in different directions. Not so much a timeline to where they're able um to take an object and will the object if it's high SE, or take a theme and project the theme if it's high NI. With them, since they have that high detailed sense impression, they will be able to um look at more of the possibilities with the object that is stored. Now, if it's an NE lead, NE leads are the opposite of SI leads. So these people is all about the possibilities. A lot of times they will be expanding in space intuitively, um out, away from the object. So it's not much sense impression with an NE lead, but it's just enough to where you can see why the stereotype is that these people are more playful when it comes down to their perception. And it makes sense that they will be, because they're not actually they don't have that focus point to that like the SENI users do. There's a focus there that kind of makes it intense. You take up some air and you compress it underneath a car. If you was to lower the car, the aerodynamics will speed the air up. That's SENI. And that will make it more intense. Now, if you do that, now the NE SI variant to that will be to kind of raise up the car that is becomes loose. The air becomes loose, and loose air does what? Expand out in many different ways all over the place. It expands more widely versus compressed to one particular uh point of view. So when you think of it in this way, you start to see how the NE is actually able to come away from the object, away from the subject as an NE lead, and kind of jumping around from sense impression to sense impression quite quite quickly. You know, there's not a focus point into a narrative, but it's more so it can go in all these different ways. I can see a cup, and this cup kind of reminds me of autumn and some shit like that. And he's like, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? But to them, it means something. To them, it can mean autumn. And, from me drinking from this cup, I feel like autumn because back in the day, I used to use this same cup in autumn. And there's some depth factor when it comes down to the SINE axis, but the depth is related to the sense impression. That is not what SENI is doing. We could care less about sense impressions. We're focusing on the narrative, where this object is going, what it's doing, if it's high SE, the narrative, and where we are going, if it's like high NIFE type stuff. Where are we going? You know, where in all these other external objects being utilized within the narrative. Opposite of SINE. So when you look at SINE, you can see both. You can see how and why they need to work together, because if you have a sense impression towards an object, why wouldn't you be able to expand in many different ways an object can actually branch off? The perspective of that will open up the more you know about that particular object, and that will in itself create possibilities for said particular object. Yeah. Thanks guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think later.